this webinar. So as we mentioned, inside the email invitation to this webinar, we are recording this webinar, and the intent is really to make this available for later reference for everyone and for folks who were not able to join us today. So again, fair warning, this is being recorded and may be posted publicly. So again, the webinar purpose is that we are really organizing this webinar to give you guys, the MPO staff, an opportunity to ask us questions that you may have about the SCS summary guide that we shared with you via email earlier this month, and that was on May 8th. And really what we're looking to do today is we will have these brief introductions given by me. We'll have another of my staff give, can folks please mute their lines if you're not speaking at this point. That'll help with the background, thanks. And then we will have another of my staff go through a brief, walkthrough of the 2 attachments that we sent over. We did ask for questions ahead of time, and we did receive a few. So we'll start off with the Q&A there and go through some of the responses to those. And then as you guys have time, please use the group chat box, since we do have about 44 participants in total on here. I'd like you guys to utilize the group chat box to submit any additional questions, and we will continue through those as time permits. And if we don't get through all of them, we for sure can follow up with this whole group with written responses. So with that, there's also the opportunity to know that we can schedule separate meetings with MPO staff if there are still outstanding questions after we go through this webinar. And I think we have already started scheduling those for folks who have very specific questions to their situations. So one of the things, I know we have 44 participants, so I don't think I'll be able to ask you guys to all do introductions, but maybe what we can do is at least get a sense of who's here from each of the MPOs, and maybe I'll start from north to south. Do we have anyone from Shasta?
Yeah, this is Sean Tejan from Shasta.
Great. Great, thank you. Anyone from Butte CAG?
Yes, this is Brian Lasagna here with BCAG.
Great, thanks. SACOG?
Yeah, Bruce Griesenbeck is here.
Thanks, hi Bruce. MTC ABAG?
Yep, James Cho's here.
Great. San Joaquin COG?
Ryan Niblock here.
Great, Ryan. Stan COG?
Isael Ojeda and Elizabeth Hahn.
Great, hey. MCAG? Hearing none. Madera?
This is Dylan Stone.
Great, hi Dylan. Fresno COG?
Christine Kai, and I also see Sess and Kai also are here.
Thank you, welcome. Anyone from AMBAG?
Bhupendra Patel, and I have a Will Condon and Gina Smith, my staff also.
Perfect, perfect, thank you. Tulare CAG? Okay, Kings CAG? And, okay, Slow COG?
Yes, James Worthley, Daniel Aldello, and Rita Morales-Duran.
And
Perfect.
Sarah Woolsey.
Welcome.
And Sarah.
Oh, perfect. Hi, Sarah. Kern COG? Okay. SCAG? Okay. SBCAG?
Hi, Andrew Orfila here.
Oh, great. Hi, Andrew. And SANDAG?
Good morning, Leslie. This is Elisa Arias, and we have a few staff from SANDAG joining us from modeling, from energy, environmental planning, so we're all here.
Oh, wonderful. Great. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Nader. And so you guys know I have both Monty and my team, everyone who's involved in our staff on the SCS evaluations is also here. So CARB is here in force to listen to a whole bunch of the questions and hopefully help to respond in a productive way to help us through, I think, what I consider a tool for all of us to get through this process more smoothly as we move through the third round evaluation. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Nader.
Hi everyone, this is Nader Afzalan. I'm part of the SB 375 program as well. Thanks for joining the webinar. As Leslie mentioned, we sent out the information about the SCS submittal package earlier this month on May the 8th. The package is a summary guide based on the updated guidelines designed by CARB to help you with your third SCS submittal. We hope this information is a helpful guide to you and any consultants you may be using by providing clear guidance and a framework on what's needed for submitting your third SCS. So a couple of things before I jump into more details. First of all, we recognize that there are regional and organizational differences among MPOs. So we encourage you to customize the information in your submittal according to the specific context of your region or SCS. Also, what we will be talking about today does not apply to your second SCS if you haven't still submitted that one. This information only refers to submitting the documents for your third round of SCS. In addition, this information does not apply to submitting your technical methodology, which should happen prior to preparing this submittal package. For information about the technical methodology submittal, you can refer to the updated guidelines Appendix A, and you can find that on our website as well. So SCS submittal package summary guide consists of 2 attachments provided to you via email. In the next couple of minutes, I'll provide a very short summary of these documents and explain what's included in each one of them. So let's look at attachment A, and I'm going to share my screen so that we're all on the same page on that. So this one is attachment A, and this attachment includes information and documentation that MPOs should submit to CARB to start and complete its evaluation. We have organized this attachment according to the determination and reporting components of the SCS Evaluation Guidelines. This document unpacks the guidelines and provides details about information about each component. And the biggest change from how we all have approached submittals in the past to the third round of SCS is the focus on evaluating the SCS policies, the strategies, investment, and other implementing actions. So we're looking at the policy analysis here, for example, on the screen. You will see detailed information when we examine the SCS policy commitments when you look at this part. And we, of course, encourage you to look at the SCS evaluation guidelines on our website if you just need more information about each one of these components. Again, I want to emphasize that the summary guide responds and correlates with the updated guidelines that we have shared with you before. And to help with providing information for each one of these components, we have created some example tables, and those tables are provided in the attachment B called example tables. I'm gonna share my screen to look at that one very quickly as well. So table 1 is the data table. Table 2 provides a framework so that you can very easily provide information about strategies and actions. To simplify this process for the MPOs, some of these ones are just yes and no questions. So for example, for this one, you can just say, well, yes, this one is a strategy that's included in the previous SCS. Again, we have another yes, no question for example, the strategy quantified in TDM, or whether the strategy is quantified as off-model strategy. So again, we try to create these tables to simplify this whole process of providing this information as part of your submittal. Let's look at table 3, which gives a structure to provide information about the SCS transportation project funding. And as you can see, for some of these columns, you can just check a box here. For example, for project category, you can check a box on active transportation and say that the category of this project is active transportation. We can check a box here and say that this project category is road maintenance. For some of the other columns, again, for project completion, time period, again, you can check boxes here. Of course, for some of the other ones, you need to provide text. Tables 4 and 5 are about the tracking implementation analysis. I'm going to talk more about table 5 in the Q&A section in a couple of minutes, but these tables are provided for you to provide the information for tracking implementation analysis. And if you look at table 6, that's a sample table for the forecasted development pattern data. Again, you may customize some of these tables based on your planning or regional context. For example, if you look at table 6 here, you'll see that we're asking for place type examples. These are all the place types examples that we have provided. But considering the fact that the categories of place type in your region or MPO might be different from the ones that we have provided here, you may need to customize this table and use your own place type categories. You may also need to do this customization for some of the other tables as well. In summary, we have created all these tables just to facilitate your submittal process. If you believe you definitely need to provide the submittal information in other formats, please just talk to us. We're open to explore other options as well. We, however, would like to have a structure in place so that we can evaluate the plans in a timely manner. So it'd be helpful if you use this structure or a similar one for providing the information. I'm gonna go back to the slide deck. We talked about attachment A, attachment B. So it was a very short summary about the SCS submittal package. We have shared the package with you, so hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at it in detail. And we have provided all the information about the submittal process in the email we sent earlier this month. Generally, the expectation is that MPOs would submit their SCS information digitally through Sustainable Communities mailbox and their regional liaison. So the liaison would confirm the receipt and do a completeness check based on the information provided in the summary guide. And CARB will need 60 days from the date the submittal is confirmed to be complete to issue its determination. So before starting to look at the questions that we have received from you, I'm going to stop here to see if there is any questions about the submittal process.
Yes, this is Elizabeth Hahn. I guess I haven't really had an opportunity to review the information that you provided so far, so forgive me if this question is somewhat basic, but what in the last table that you showed where you're requesting information on jobs, housing density for base year 2035, so forth, where you have general plan build out, I guess I'm not entirely clear on what you're asking for there on the general plan build out.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for the great question. I'm going to talk about that exactly in the Q&A because that was a question we have received from some of the other MPOs as well. So stay tight and I'll talk about it. If you have additional questions after that, let's just talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yes, this is Brian with BCAG. In regards to table 1, that looks very similar to the tables that were provided by ARB for the past SCS rounds. What are the significant changes that have been made to those?
Thanks, Brian, for the question. Mani, can you respond to this one about the changes between the data tables?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for joining for this conversation. Data table, I think what we have done is we dropped some variables that's not related to the question, related to the information that we are not using. So for example, if I have to give you mode share during the peak hours from the previous version of the table to this one, we dropped. Similarly, congestion index, we dropped as well. In addition, we also dropped without project in this scenario. In this evaluation from third SCS onwards, we are looking for the base year of the plan, 2020 and 2035, and the out year of the plan. So the with projects only we are requesting. So that has significantly dropped number of variables in filling this table. Those are the changes we made. And again, we really based on our past experience, we really systematically went through and based on our past 2 SCS evaluation, we identified what information we really use in our evaluation. So those are the variables only we left in this data table. If you have any specific question about a particular variable, I'll be happy to walk you through or answer that aspect of it. I think there is a question on this, Nod, maybe you should get into the question answer and walk them through. So
sure, yes, sure. Well, thanks, Mani. I'm gonna dive into the questions and answers. We're gonna be talking about some of these ones, and at the end, we're gonna have more time to talk about the questions and answer the questions that we have received in the chat box as well. So thank you to all of you who submitted questions to us. We have received 8 questions related to data requests in the data table and development pattern table, as well as information we're asking MPOs to provide as part of the policy and investment analysis. So in the next couple of minutes, I'll look at these questions and respond to them. In the meantime, if, again, those of you who are participating have additional questions, please enter them into the queue by typing them into the chat box, and we'll get to as many questions as we can with our remaining time. And I should also mention that if any of you is interested in having like individual meetings after this, we can definitely do that as well. So question 1, which is also related to data table, is asking, can the CARB team describe how they have worked to minimize the number of data requests included in these tables? Would CARB be amendable to considering MPO requests to make select rows optional, focusing mandatory reporting requirements on rows that are essential to evaluate GHG outcomes and monitor progress? So as part of the SCS Evaluation Guidelines development process, CARB undertook a process to re-examine its data requests for the MPOs to account for what we have learned over the course of program implementation to date. As Mani mentioned, this included consideration of what data were available or were not available, or were useful or not useful across our past evaluations. As well as what additional data was essential to meet the program implementation with the direction we have got from our board. Also, in developing the summary guide, we're providing our take on a structure or framework to help MPOs organize their submittal in a way that aligns with the determination and reporting elements of the guidelines. So, in other words, the summary guide is consistent with the guidelines in how it differentiates determination and reporting components, and describes what we will be using for evaluating versus monitoring. So we need information for both components to implement our program mandates and the board direction. Question 2, again, related to the data table. I'm not sure what the various place types they are referring to, or if they are just giving MPOs some flexibility to self-define here. So place types provided in table 6 are examples of place types you may have defined in your RTP SCS. That includes like types of communities, like urban core or rural residential. MPOs should work with place types that they have used in their plans and provided definitions used. So short answer, yes, MPOs have flexibility to self-define here. I hope that answers your question, Elizabeth, as well. Question 3, again, that's still related to the data table, asks, our model doesn't delineate TNC trip activity. We discussed adding data for TNCs in the ABM, but forecasting TNC demand into the future was too speculative. There is just not enough data out there to determine what's happening in the baseline and how it'll be utilized in the future. I think we'll just have to leave it blank for now and just assume that all TNC trips are lumped into the shared ride category in our region. So if you have gathered TNC data, you can still provide it in the data table, even if you're not including that data in the model. If you have lumped this as part of the shared rides, you can still include a footnote and mention that since the share of TNC is small, it's lumped as part of the shared ride. So let's look at some of the questions we have received related to strategies, actions, and investments. Question 4 asks, Table 2 refers to implementation actions taken for specific strategies. What about a strategy that is brand new to this plan cycle? It seems reasonable that implementation actions should be identified for future years, but it may not be reasonable to expect that implementation actions have already been taken for a brand new policy or investment. So implementation actions refer to the actions that MPOs have taken or are planning to take. So if an MPO has a brand new strategy, the MPO should explain the actions that it's planning to take or implement the strategy. So the action should basically show MPO's commitments towards implementing their strategies, whether these strategies are brand new or carryover. So it doesn't matter whether they're brand new or carryover, MPOs need to provide that information. Question 5, can you confirm that Table 3 is requesting costs in the year of expenditure dollars per federal and state regulations? It would be confusing to list in current year dollars. Furthermore, would CARB be willing to have project location as a shapefile rather than a text field? So yes, Table 3 requests cost in the year of expenditure dollars. If an MPO is using a different year, they need to indicate which year the table refers to. Regarding to the second part of the question, again, yes, CARB accepts project locations as shapefiles, but MPOs can also provide the project location by referring to the jurisdiction and intersection of the project. But please make sure that you're consistent in providing this information. So for example, if you're providing the information by referring to projects, jurisdiction, and intersection, please do that for all the projects if that's possible. Question 3 is a question about Table 6, which is the example table for forecasted development pattern. It's asking, could you clarify what is meant by general plan built out estimate? Again, so with this question, we want to understand whether and how the plan is implementable and the extent to which the SCS is aligned with the general plan. So general plan built out estimate refers to what is estimated in the general plans if combined for the entire region. We understand that sometimes general plans may have different timelines or definitions of place types. It's why here we're referring to an estimate. Again, I hope this clarifies the question that we got earlier. Question 6, again, goes back to Table 6. Question 7 goes back to Table 6. So the question is that Table 6 refers to general plan built out land use characteristics. Calculating this built out condition is more complex than the model analysis listed on the left for the specific years. Would CARB be amendable to making this column optional rather than required? So we understand the complexities of calculating the exact numbers for the built out. It's why we're asking for an estimate here. Again, the purpose of providing this information is just to show the consistency of your SCS with general plans. So we need this information to complete our evaluation, even if the information about the general plan built out is an estimate. We understand that in some cases, you may need to provide that number as an estimate. And the last question, I'm going a little bit fast so that we're going to have a lot of time for open question and the Q&A. Last question, which is question 8, ask in a spreadsheet table 5, which is the example table for additional data for tracking implementation analysis, is clearly marked as optional. Would you consider noting this in the guidance document as well? So this was initially provided as some MPOs have asked us to identify existing data sources for the metrics we include in our SV 150 reporting on program progress. And that was with the idea that some may want to incorporate these data points into their own SCS tracking processes. And that's why this is noted as optional, but we'll see why this can be confusing. So to clarify, CARB will actually be already tracking these metrics at the statewide and MPO level for our SV 150 reporting purpose. So it's not necessary for the MPOs to provide table 5 to us anymore. So we will revise the example table document and reflect this change. We are done with all the 8 questions that we have received. To look at the additional questions, I'm actually going to check the chat box to see what we have gotten here. Sean is asking a question about table 3. If MPOs want to change the years for the project completion time period, is that fine? And does CARB still need certain years called out in the table? Leslie, would you like to?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So table 3 is the transportation project funding table. It's basically what we consider the transportation project list. And, you know, I think, Sean, to your point, what we've at minimum asked that you categorize is basically through the 2035 milestone time year and then anything beyond 2035. If you want to go ahead, and I think most folks already do include an actual year or not, or range, you can do that. But at minimum, we're looking for those 2 bins, so through 2035 and beyond 2035.
Okay, I think that's helpful. I think it came up because we look at, you know, a lot of times we have short term, you know, time frame. Usually we look at it for 7 years or so, and then we have long term plans. We look at our planning process. So that was one of the things.
Yeah. Okay.
How that lines up with how we do our project tables typically in the last couple RTPs. So.
That makes sense. I mean, we're not, I guess, we want it to be easy for you guys, so require minimal change in terms of what you're already preparing. But, you know, again, that is for our purposes, what we will need at minimum is tying to that, you know, the by 2035 and after 2035 date. Okay.
So I don't see additional questions in the chat box, but I think we can, oh, we got a question from James. So James is asking about identifying implementation actions. For new strategies, if we do not have implementation actions for strategies that may happen beyond 5 years after plan adoption to the level of detail described in the submittal guidance, what do you recommend? I think that goes to you, Leslie. Again.
Yeah, that will go to me. Hi, James. That's a great question. I mean, I think part of what we are trying to assess with this new third round is, you know, whether or not you have, if you don't have actions that are specified to the detail as we put in the summary guide, and you think that you will have actions, at least that will be pursuant to figuring those out, those should be documented. Part of what CARB staff is looking for and what our board has asked us to talk about is whether or not the strategies included in these SCSs really are, have a chance or reasonably expected to be implemented. And part of the way that CARB staff is looking at that is trying to put forward that there is evidence that there will be work done to help advance these strategies. And so, I mean, it might help also to get a sense of what types of strategies you're thinking might not be worked on within the next 5 years.
Well, I mean, it's more of a general question as we review all our strategies and try to look into the documentation for it. You know, we definitely include strategies only that we plan on and implementing,
right.
But it may not have like a, you know, funding identified or a TA identified. You know, your suggestions in the guidance were helpful, but we may not have some of those details for some of the strategies.
Mm-hmm. I think it's, you know, understanding that this is a planning document. Obviously, you know, the strongest strategies will be ones that do have funding identified, that do have an element that is tied to an already funded program by the board or something that your board has committed to otherwise in its overall work program that basically says, yeah, you know, maybe we have committed to exploring this. And that is one thing that we've been exploring as well in terms of, you know, what are other types of ways to document commitment by an MPO board, right? A lot of times that shows up in some of your overall work program work. Sometimes it shows up in things that you're doing to pursue studies and others to help get you to the point where you're able to better get a commitment of direct funding or other. So, I mean, those are the types of things that we would be looking for some type of documentation towards. Is there a partnership that you guys have already identified in which, you know, you guys are going to meet and produce some type of recommendation toward getting that? So if that's, I don't know if that's helpful to your situation.
Well, yeah, I think we can work through any sort of details through sort of specific conversations if we run into some concerns.
Okay. Yeah, happy to talk more about that too.
Thank you.
And Bruce has a related question. Are the implementation actions, Bruce Grinzenberg from SACOG, are the implementation actions going to be plan built out? If you combine all of the general plan for your region, what would be the estimate for the number of jobs, housing, or density for each place type? Did that answer your question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think I'll probably just have to take a look at see how easy that is, how easily that's accomplished.
Do you have ideas about the, I mean, about the complexity? I mean, what are the issues that you think may raise if you want to do this analysis?
I guess I'm not, you know, I've never done that analysis before. I don't know, perhaps there's some other MPOs on the call that who have done this kind of thing before, and they can weigh in and explain, you know, if this is something that is really all that difficult to ascertain.
Sure, and we'd be happy to set up a time for an individual call and just talk about this in more detail as well.
Thanks.
So hi, this is James at FloatCog. I had a similar question or follow-up question on that. Are you expecting that we would add all of our general plans together to show each, or show each jurisdiction separately. I mean, that could be a very long list for some of the MPOs to show all jurisdictions, all of their housing general plan build out, total number of dwelling units, for instance, if you break them all out. And it's the same amount of work if you're doing them individually, I guess, or aggregating them. And some of the general plans don't go out to 2035 in our area. So if a general plan ends, for instance, their build out currently ends in 2030, are we not allowed to project that maybe they might update their general plan beyond 2030?
Thanks for that question. Yeah, so to answer your first question, yes, we're expecting just having it combined. So it's not going to be for each individual jurisdiction. So it's just a combined number for the entire region. But again, we understand the complexities of calculating the exact numbers for the built out, and it's why we're asking for an estimate. The complexities would be about the fact that sometimes different jurisdictions have different definitions of place types, and also as you also mentioned, there are complexities about the timeline as well. So again, it's why we're asking for an estimate. But thanks for the question and clarification here.
So Nader, it's Bruce Griesenbeck here from SACOG. I had something to offer to, I think, Elizabeth for and just the general questions on this. SACOG does that kind of update of our general plan build out estimate for areas where there's specific plans that are active and areas that are redeveloping. We don't do a general plan build out estimate for areas that are already developed and unlikely to change over the life of our plan. But I guess, Nader, one question I had to maybe make it easier for somebody to actually respond to what you're asking for. It does take a lot of effort. We have 28 jurisdictions, each with a general plan. They have different land use categories. We spend a huge amount of effort to kind of correlate that to our parcel land use data, and then verify with them that it's a fair reflection of their general plan. One question I had, which would make it easier to report this, because most general plans themselves in the document have build out, most general plans show what the build out is for the general plan. Would it be acceptable to substitute place type with jurisdiction and have the build out estimates go by jurisdiction, which makes it more an issue of what's in the document rather than having a separate land use database that could be tallied by different area types that you have listed there. And would that make it, I guess, in my own experience, that would make it easier to report. But I guess my question is, would that be acceptable to ARB?
Thanks, Bruce, for clarification and answering the question, and also making this suggestion. I'm gonna ask Mani if you could jump in to provide a response here. Mani, would that be acceptable to look at jurisdictions in terms of, instead of place types?
Yeah, hey, Bruce. Yeah, I think if I understand your question itself, Bruce, you're saying that the different place types you'll be kind of combining. Is that, am I understanding your question correctly there?
I think
based on the jurisdictions, each jurisdictions within your region?
Yeah, and it's not really a question for us because we do take that effort and put a huge amount of staff time into coordinating with our jurisdictions on what their current land use policies show as build out, and get that into a land use database that we can query with different areas like the ones that you showed here. I just don't think a lot of I think a lot of MPOs don't do that, and I think that's why there's so many questions on this one topic. Is it's the idea that you have the ability to query that on different area types or different sub areas that aren't jurisdictional in terms of their. So it's not a question I'm asking on my behalf.
Okay,
I'm trying to interpret some of the concerns and questions that I'm hearing getting thrown your way, and trying to figure out if there's an alternate way to show sub areas within a region and report a build out and what % of growth shows up in that jurisdiction in a way that's more naturally comes out of the documents of that are produced for the general plan, which I think most general plans just report build out as a matter of course. So if jurisdiction is a substitute for place type there, it would make it easier for jurisdictions that don't have that land use database to build on and respond to your request. So it's not really my question. I'm literally trying to figure out if there's a way to solve a problem here.
This is Sean over at CERTA, and I'm actually in completely agreement with Bruce in looking at the data table. That's essentially how I have set it up for our region in a draft format. Is we don't, even though we have an activity-based model, we don't have a land use model. We don't identify place types, even as it's provided in the example. So for our region, really the only way to try to do a comparison is literally by jurisdiction and have some overall numbers. We do have our what we call strategic growth areas, so we might be able to dial that down a little bit. I don't know. We've never gone through a process of really looking in detail at the general plans across the region. And mind you, we only have 3 cities in 1 county. But even there, you know, in a regional model, your place types or land uses is a lot more generalized anyways, and not nearly as detailed as a general plan may get for a city or county. So I support that idea if we can do it by essentially the overall build out and try to compare that to our RTP-SCS by a jurisdiction standpoint.
And this is Dan Wayne, CERTA Shasta as well. There's another layer of complexity on this, in that you have to be very careful about the methodology that's used to even figure this out, because the whole point of filling out this table is not just for one cycle, it's for doing it over multiple cycles and watching the trend or watching the response to certain strategies. So, you know, you may go through a lot of effort to get this figured out and put down into the table, but if any of that gets lost in translation from at the local jurisdiction level or at the MPO level in future iterations, then it complicates things.
Yeah, thanks for everyone chiming in. I know the place type might be, it's just an example. Some of you might be just using at the jurisdiction level. That's what, if you're using it in your plan itself, maybe it's better to, you can provide at that level. Maybe the place type is whoever uses, I know SACOG, for example, Bruce was talking about it. They're doing it already at that type of place types. Even they might be even having more detail than the place types listed in this table. So all we are interested in is how well it's aligned. That our real motivation or our real interest, even during the guidelines development process, we all talked about it. How well this general plan aligns with your plan itself. That's the real intention in asking this information. So as long as whatever the information that goes into your plan from the general plan, that's what we would like to see it here. How well it aligns and how well it closely matches with it. I know some places, as we talked earlier, the general plan may not go all the way to 2035 out here. You might have forecasted on your own based on in discussion with your local city planners and agencies there. Maybe that's what you will reflect it here. Just you can even footnote it, or you can even say that, hey, the general plan went only till 2030, and however we forecasted in our plan based on our conversation or the process that you went through. So the intention is not to make it complicated or not make a perfect number here. Just we want to see how well this general plan and your plan forecast aligns with it. That's the intention. Maybe that'll help you guys to understand that.
Hi, this is James Cho with MTC. Just a couple things, so I don't know, when you're talking about aligning, and we brought this up in our submitted question, the general plans won't include some of our strategies around upzoning. So when you say align, it may not match is what, or may even our estimates may be even higher in some cases. So just want to make sure what you're looking for when you say align between the general plan build out versus our estimates, our forecast.
Yeah, I guess, Nasamani, I think, I don't know, there may be a few other smaller MPOs in the same situation as ours, but our local jurisdictions and the MPO we do not have any, I guess the MPO doesn't have any land use authority whatsoever. And, we are encouraging our local jurisdictions to follow suit with what, obviously what we're putting in our RTP SES, and we are coordinating very closely with them that while they don't always agree and don't follow suit. So I guess I am a little worried about this. We can only do so much, especially being an MPO that we don't have a land use model. We keep our distance with our local jurisdiction so as not to step on toes. So,
yeah, Elizabeth, we understand, that those challenges. I know surely you guys don't have the land use authority. We understand that. So, but the real interest is maybe even to answer James' question from MTC. I think when we say alignment is, again, it's not like a perfectly matching exactly one-on-one. I'm sure you have you went through your own forecast approach, and so if what is reflected in the general plan, that goes as an input to your plan development itself. So if you report that, and then on top of that, you went through your own process to forecast and project your own housing units and jobs and everything for your region. So that's what will be reflected in the plan. So it may not match one-on-one. We understand that aspect of it. But if it is, say, if I have to just pick an example here, is it like within 10% difference or 100% difference? Maybe that kind of gives us a relative sense of it, how much the implementation is going to make sure that the locals are aligned with this forecast itself. So that's kind of the big picture understanding we are looking for.
Yeah, I think if there's an opportunity to, provide a little bit more flexibility, as was suggested previously with regard to how this information is compiled, I think that would be very much appreciated just for cost reasons. So,
sure.
Thank you.
Sure, Elizabeth. We'll be happy to work with you. I know it's not one size fits everybody. Each one of you have each one of your regions goes through a little different process. So we'll be happy to talk to you guys and better understand in your situation, and we can work it out through that process. Yeah, we'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any
other question? Sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if you can bring up table 3 on the project costs and source of funding.
I'm sharing table 3, so you should all be able to see it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, that the regional plans have the specificity for funding sources by project, on a long range plan 30 years out, given the competitive nature of most funding sources currently. So that may be an area that at least I feel it will be problematic to complete. And I don't know if other MPOs have the same understanding.
Actually, yes, we have heard some of that feedback before. And I think what we're asking for is if you do know, and it is something that you have programmed already through your MTIP, that is some for RTIP, but you should be identifying that there. But we do understand that a number of the projects, and whether in planning phase or other, may not have things totally programmed yet, and so you don't necessarily know. And in that case, you can indicate that within the cell, not yet programmed or other.
It can be done, you know, for projects that are in the program of projects, but I don't feel that we.
No, that's totally understandable. Yes.
Any other questions?
And
sorry.
We'll make a note for folks. Sorry, I'm just making a mental note that we should make a note of that when we make some changes to the table. So. Okay. Other questions? Okay. Well. Okay, guys, it sounds like we're not getting any more questions at this point, but I think as Nader said, and as I communicated earlier, you know, this is an ongoing process. As you think of questions and as you get more into the development of your submittal packages and the SCS in general, you know, please feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to talk with you about what makes sense for preparation on your ends and on our ends. I think, you know, the real intent with putting out this summary guide was to make sure that we had a smoother process once we get to submittal time. And I know there's been frustration in the past about, you know, oh gosh, you know, back and forth in terms of getting a complete submittal. So hopefully this is a step forward in getting us to a place where we don't have a whole bunch of questions late in the game. And so I appreciate you engaging with us earlier and often. And if you have questions about any of this, you know, understandably reach out to us. We are very happy to talk through any issues moving forward. In response to a lot of the questions that we got here, I think we identified some good changes and clarifications to the document. So I'd like to go ahead and say that we will be making some modification to those. We will resend it out. And we will be posting it to our website once we do that. And other than that, is there anything else folks wanted to cover? I'm looking at Monty or Nader. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you did a good summary, Leslie. Thanks. Thanks everyone for joining us. It's really one good discussion. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on your Friday. Appreciate it. And also just want to throw out there, you know, CARB team has been fielding a lot of questions and thinking through a lot and watching, as I know you may have, about responses to COVID and post-pandemic, what assumptions should be made as folks are moving into their SCS development. It's definitely, I know, an area of interest for a lot of us, and we're trying to think about what are good ways to have this conversation and share that information across those. So I don't know if you guys have any ideas about that, but just want to throw that out there. We're thinking about it. We'd love to engage with all of you some more and share that type of information as we move forward. But
yeah,
we're
definitely interested in hearing the perspective from CARB, you know, telework,
okay.
strategies that now we're rethinking maybe.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd like to open up a conversation with you guys some more in terms of, you know, how we can facilitate a good sharing of that information across all of us, because I think it would be really helpful for all of us. All right. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Have a good